The kitchen chair sat in the middle of my living room like a crime scene marker, rope still dangling from its wooden arms. My 7-year-old son, Colby's wrists were so raw that the paramedic had to be extra gentle when checking his pulse. His communication device, the one he used to tell me, "I love you" every night, lay smashed on the floor. The neighbors who called 911 were still outside, Mrs. Patterson crying into her husband's shoulder because of what she'd witnessed through our window. But none of that compared to what I would show my family 3 days later on a laptop screen that would change everything. My name is Melody, and I'm 34 years old. I work as a warehouse supervisor at a distribution center 40 minutes from our home in suburban Cincinnati. It's not glamorous work, but it pays enough to keep a roof over our heads and cover the endless therapy appointments, specialized equipment, and medical bills that come with raising a child with severe autism. Every morning, I wake up at 5:30, check on Colby to make sure he slept through the night, prepare his visual schedule for the day, and set out his clothes in the exact order he likes to put them on. Blue shirt first, always blue on Tuesdays, then his soft pants with no tags, then his special pressure vest that helps him feel calm. Colby is my entire world. He doesn't speak with words, but he speaks with his hands, his eyes, and his gentle humming when he's happy. He was diagnosed with nonverbal autism when he was 3, right around the time his father, Dennis, decided that having a broken son was too much for him to handle. Those were his actual words. "I can't raise a broken child, Melody." He moved to Phoenix and sends child support checks that barely cover Colby's occupational therapy. The woman who would eventually hurt my son in ways I couldn't imagine? That was Francine, Dennis's mother, my former mother-in-law. At 58, she had the appearance of a respectable grandmother, silver hair always perfectly styled, cardigans from Talbot's, and a smile that church friends called warm, but I'd learned to recognize as calculating. She'd worked for 30 years as a school administrator, the kind who pride themselves on never having a student step out of line. She retired early with full benefits and a philosophy about children that should have been my first warning sign. There's no such thing as a bad child, only weak parents. When she first offered to watch Colby, I was desperate. The specialized daycare had a 2-year waiting list, and I was paying $19 an hour for a caregiver who kept canceling last minute. My savings were disappearing faster than I could replenish them. My own parents, Paulette and Jerome, lived 2 hours away in Columbus and both still worked full-time. My brother Wade was a lawyer downtown but worked 80-hour weeks, and my sister Simone was a healthcare administrator juggling her own 3 kids. "Melody, dear," Francine had said, showing up at my door on a Sunday morning with a container of homemade cookies Colby couldn't eat because of his dietary restrictions. "I know we've had our differences, but that boy is my blood. My grandson deserves better than strangers who don't love him." I wanted to remind her that she'd seen Colby exactly 4 times since the divorce, and once was at a grocery store by accident. But desperation makes you ignore your instincts. "Francine, Colby requires very specific care," I explained. "He has sensory processing issues. He follows strict routines, and changes upset him deeply. When he flaps his hands, that's him being happy. When he rocks, he's self-soothing. These aren't behaviors that need correcting." She nodded, taking out a small notebook. "Of course, I educated hundreds of children, Melody. I understand different learning styles." That should have been warning number 2. She said learning styles, not neurological differences. She saw Colby as a student to be taught, not a child to be understood. The day I finally agreed to let her watch him, Colby had been up all night with sensory overload from 4th of July fireworks. I was exhausted, on the verge of losing my job from missed days, and she stood in my doorway looking like Salvation in a purple cardigan. "You're drowning, dear," she said, not unkindly. "Let me help, Monday through Friday, 7:30 to 5:30. No charge. Family helps family." I said yes. 3 months later, I would be showing a room full of that same family hidden camera footage that would send Francine to criminal court and destroy the image everyone had of the respectable grandmother who just wanted to help. But that Tuesday afternoon when the ambulance pulled away with my son, I only knew one thing. The person I'd trusted most had been the one to hurt him worst. Life as a single mother meant mastering 1,000 small rituals that held our world together. Every morning started the same way. Colby would wake at exactly 6:15, not because of an alarm, but because his internal clock ran with military precision. I'd hear him in his room, humming the tune from his favorite sensory video, a signal that meant he'd slept well. On good days, he'd already be sitting on his bed, rocking gently, waiting for me to come in with his morning pressure hug, the deep, firm embrace that helped his nervous system prepare for the day. Our house wasn't much, a 3-bedroom rental in a neighborhood where the schools had good special education programs. I'd painted Colby's room a soft blue, the exact shade he'd pointed to at Home Depot, one of the few times he'd shown clear preference for something. His toys were organized in clear bins, labeled with pictures so he could find what he needed without frustration. The kitchen had visual cards on every cabinet showing what was inside. The bathroom had a step-by-step chart for brushing teeth. Some people might see it as excessive, but for Colby, this structure meant freedom from anxiety. After Dennis left, I rebuilt our entire life around Colby's needs. My job at the distribution center wasn't my dream career, but my supervisor, Robert, had a nephew with autism and understood when I needed flexibility. "Family first, Melody," he'd say when I had to leave for a therapy appointment. "The packages aren't going anywhere." The pay was decent, $17 an hour plus overtime, and the health insurance covered most of Colby's therapies. Still, the copays added up. Speech therapy twice a week, occupational therapy 3 times, behavioral therapy on Saturdays. My credit cards carried balances I tried not to think about. The morning Francine made her offer, I just received a call from my 3rd caregiver in 2 months saying she'd found a better-paying job. I was sitting at my kitchen table, looking at my budget spreadsheet, trying to figure out how to make the numbers work. Colby was in the living room, lining up his toy cars in perfect rows, an activity that could keep him calm and focused for hours. "You look tired," Francine had said, letting herself in with the spare key I'd forgotten she still had from when Dennis lived here. "I'm fine," I replied automatically, closing my laptop so she wouldn't see the overdue bills. "No, you're not." She sat down across from me, her perfume, something expensive and floral, filling the small kitchen. "I've been doing a lot of thinking since Dennis moved away. I wasn't the best mother-in-law to you, Melody. I blamed you for things that weren't your fault." This was unexpected. Francine had never apologized for anything in the 5 years I'd known her. "When Dennis was young," she continued, "I was so focused on my career that I missed things, important things. I have regrets. But I'm retired now and I have time. Let me help with Colby." "Francine, it's not just babysitting. Colby needs constant supervision. He can't tell you if something's wrong. He gets overwhelmed by loud noises, bright lights, certain textures. Sometimes he has meltdowns that can last an hour." "I raised 3 children while working full-time," she said, a slight edge creeping into her voice before she softened it again. "And I spent 30 years managing hundreds of students, including many with special needs." That wasn't exactly true. She'd been an administrator, not a special education teacher, but I was desperate, and she was family, and she was free. I spent that entire first Sunday training her. I showed her how Colby tapped his chest when he was thirsty, rubbed his stomach when hungry. I demonstrated how to use his communication device, a tablet with pictures he could press to express basic needs. I walked her through his medication schedule, the signs of sensory overload, the specific way he needed to be redirected when he started repetitive behaviors that could hurt him. "This weighted blanket helps when he's anxious," I explained. "And this chewy necklace is for when he needs oral input. Never take it away as punishment." "Punishment?" Francine raised an eyebrow. "I don't believe in punishment, Melody. I believe in teaching consequences." Something about the way she said it made my stomach tighten, but I pushed the feeling aside. My mother, Paulette, had always said I was too protective, too quick to assume the worst about people. Maybe this was Francine's way of making amends, of being the grandmother Colby deserved. That first Monday, I sat in my car for 10 minutes before driving to work, watching through the window as Francine settled onto the floor next to Colby, picking up one of his toy cars. He didn't pull away, which was remarkable. Maybe, I thought, this could actually work. Maybe sometimes people surprise you. I couldn't have known that 3 months later, I'd be reviewing footage that would make me understand that when someone shows you who they are, you should believe them the first time. The first week felt like a miracle I'd been afraid to hope for. Every evening when I came home, Francine would be sitting on the couch with Colby nearby, usually engaged with his iPad or arranging his toys. The house was cleaner than I'd left it. Dishes done, carpet vacuumed, even the perpetual pile of laundry had been folded and put away. Francine would hand me a detailed note about Colby's day, what he ate, when he took his medications, how long he napped, what activities they did together. "He's responding well to structure," she told me that Friday, her tone professional. "I've implemented a reward system. When he completes tasks without fussing, he earns screen time." "Colby doesn't really understand reward systems the same way typical kids do," I explained gently. "His therapist says his brain processes motivation differently. All children understand cause and effect, Melody. You just have to be consistent." By the third week, small things started to feel wrong. Colby's teacher, Ms. Rodriguez, pulled me aside at pickup from his weekend social skills group. "Melody, I wanted to check in. Colby seems more anxious lately. He's been resistant to sitting in chairs during our circle time, which is unusual for him. Has anything changed at home?" That same week, Colby started having nightmares again, something we'd worked through months ago. He'd wake up crying, pressing himself into the corner of his bed, his usual self-soothing techniques not working. When I tried to comfort him with his weighted blanket, he pushed it away violently, something he'd never done before. "Maybe he's just going through a developmental phase," Francine suggested when I mentioned it. "Children test boundaries, even special needs children." The way she said special needs always sounded like she was saying broken, but I needed her help. The wait list at the specialized daycare hadn't moved, and I'd just been promoted to shift supervisor, which meant a $2 raise but also more responsibility I couldn't abandon. The breaking point started small. I came home early one Thursday with a migraine. Francine's car was in the driveway, but when I walked in, the house was silent. No humming from Colby, no sound from his usual videos. I found them in the kitchen. Colby was sitting rigidly in a chair, his hands folded in his lap, tears streaming down his face. Francine sat across from him, reading a magazine. "What's happening?" I asked, my migraine instantly forgotten. "He threw his lunch on the floor," Francine said without looking up. "He's learning that actions have consequences. He sits there until he's ready to apologize." "Francine, he can't apologize. He's nonverbal, and he didn't throw it on purpose. Sometimes his motor control slips." She finally looked at me, and there was something cold in her eyes I'd never noticed before. "He's more capable than you think, Melody. Your low expectations are holding him back." I let Colby out of the chair immediately. He ran to his room and hid under his weighted blanket, something he did when overwhelmed. It took 2 hours to calm him down enough to eat dinner. "I don't think this is working," I told Francine the next morning. "Give it time," she insisted. "Change is hard, but he's learning. Yesterday, he sat quietly for a full hour while I did my crossword. That's progress." That should have been my final warning. Colby never sat quietly unless something was wrong. His natural state was movement, humming, engaging with his environment in his own way. Quiet meant shutdown. Quiet meant distress. I installed the camera that weekend, hiding it inside a decorative plant holder that gave a clear view of the living room and kitchen. I told myself it was just for peace of mind, to see how Colby spent his days. I even mentioned it to Francine, framing it as a safety measure. "Smart idea," she said. "You can see how well-behaved he is when you're not here to baby him." The next 2 weeks, I checked the footage sporadically. Most of what I saw seemed normal, though I noticed Francine spent a lot of time on her phone while Colby sat alone. But it wasn't neglect exactly. He had his toys, his tablet, his snacks within reach. Then came the call from Ms. Harding, his behavioral therapist. "Melody, I'm concerned. Colby's showing signs of trauma response. He's become fearful of restraint, which is unusual because he normally finds deep pressure calming. Has anyone been holding him down? Maybe during a meltdown?" "No," I said, but my stomach was already churning. "Let me check something." That night, after Colby was asleep, I reviewed a full day's footage from earlier that week. What I saw made me sick, but I kept watching, downloading everything, because I knew I'd need proof for what was coming next. The woman I'd trusted wasn't just strict or old-fashioned. She was systematically traumatizing my child, and she'd been doing it with a smile. Tuesday started like any other morning. Colby had eaten his breakfast, 2. Pieces of toast cut into perfect squares with peanut butter spread evenly to the edges, exactly how he needed it. Francine arrived at 7:30 sharp, wearing her usual cardigan and pearls, carrying her crossword puzzle book and reading glasses. I kissed Colby goodbye, noted his slight resistance to my leaving, but pushed through it because I had a mandatory meeting with corporate that morning. "Have a good day, sweet boy," I said, using our routine farewell. He didn't respond, just continued arranging his toy cars in a color pattern, only he understood. The meeting was about new efficiency protocols, the kind of corporate nonsense that required attendance, but not attention. I was taking notes when my phone started vibrating. One call, then another, text messages flooding in. I silenced it, planning to check at the break. But then my brother Wade called 3 times in a row, and I knew something was terribly wrong. I stepped out into the hallway and listened to the first voicemail from Mrs. Patterson, my 60-year-old neighbor who'd lived next door for 15 years. Her voice was shaking. "Melody, honey, I'm so sorry to call you at work, but something's not right. I can hear Colby screaming from inside my house with the windows closed. It's been going on for over an hour. Not crying, screaming, like he's in pain. I knocked on your door, but no one answered. I'm calling 911. Please come home." The drive home was 23 minutes. I know because I watched every second tick by on my dashboard clock, running red lights when I could, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white. I called Francine 6 times. No answer. Called the house phone. Nothing. Wade called me back while I was driving. "Mel, what's happening? Mrs. Patterson called Mom, and Mom called me. She said there's an ambulance at your house." "I don't know," I said, my voice sounding strange and distant. Francine was watching Colby. "I don't know." When I turned onto my street, it looked like a crime scene. 2 police cruisers, an ambulance, 3 fire trucks, neighbors standing on their lawns, phones out, recording. Mrs. Patterson rushed to my car before I'd even fully stopped. "They got him out," she said quickly. "He's okay. He's in the ambulance. But Melody, honey, what I saw through your back window before they arrived, that woman had him tied to a chair, with actual rope." The EMT, a young woman named Janessa, was gentle as she explained Colby's condition. Severe dehydration, rope burns on his wrists and ankles, signs of extreme distress. His diaper, which he still wore because of delayed potty training related to his autism, hadn't been changed in hours. His communication device was found broken in the trash can. "We're taking him to Cincinnati Children's," Janessa said. "You can ride with us or follow." "I'll follow," I said, because I needed to see Officer Rivera, who was documenting the scene. "Ma'am, we need to file a report," he said, his notebook out. "Your neighbor reported hearing distress for approximately 90 minutes before calling. When we arrived, we found your son restrained to a kitchen chair in the center of the living room. The caregiver was not present. The front door was locked, but the back door was open. Your son was unable to communicate his needs and showed signs of severe neglect." "Where was Francine?" "The caregiver? She's my former mother-in-law. We haven't been able to locate her yet. Does she have a history of this kind of behavior?" My phone rang. It was Francine, finally. I put it on speaker so Officer Rivera could hear. "Melody, I had an emergency. My sister Beatrice fell and I had to rush to help her. I'm sure Colby is fine. He was napping when I left." "He was tied to a chair, Francine. The police found him tied to a chair." Silence for 3 seconds, then her voice changed, became harder. "He was having one of his fits, throwing things, hitting himself. I was protecting him from himself. It's a standard restraint technique." "For how long did you leave him?" "I don't appreciate your tone, Melody. That boy is uncontrollable without proper boundaries. I did what was necessary." Officer Rivera motioned for me to keep her talking while he signaled to another officer. "Francine, there's camera footage of everything you've done." She hung up immediately. That evening, after spending 4 hours at the hospital where doctors documented Colby's injuries and dehydration, I sat in my mother's kitchen while Colby slept safely in the guest room with my father watching over him. I pulled out my laptop and began downloading every minute of footage from the past month. What I found was worse than a moment of lost control. It was a pattern of escalating abuse disguised as discipline. I called Wade. "I need you to set up a family meeting. Everyone, tomorrow night." "Mel, what are we going to do?" "We're going to watch what she did to my son. and then we're going to make sure she never does it to another child again. Wednesday evening at 6 o'clock, 18 people gathered in my mother's living room. I'd insisted everyone be there. Francine and her husband Hank, Dennis, who'd flown in from Phoenix looking haggard and confused, my parents Paulette and Jerome, my siblings Wade and Simone with their spouses, Francine's sister Beatrice, and even Francine's older brother Carlton, who'd driven down from Dayton. My mother had set out coffee and cookies that no one touched. The tension in the room was suffocating. Francine sat in the wingback chair like she was holding court, wearing a navy dress and her pearl necklace, looking every inch the respectable grandmother she pretended to be. "This is all a terrible misunderstanding," she began before I could speak. "Melody has always been dramatic about Colby's condition. The boy had a meltdown. I used a standard restraint technique for his safety, and I had to step out briefly for a family emergency. Beatrice, tell them about your fall." Beatrice looked confused. "What fall?" "Francine, I haven't seen you in 2 weeks." The room went quiet. Francine's face flushed slightly, but she recovered quickly. "I meant Margaret, our cousin. I misspoke." "Stop," I said, standing up with my laptop. "Everyone needs to see what's been happening." I connected the laptop to my mother's television, my hands steady despite the rage building in my chest. "This is ridiculous," Francine said. "I don't consent to being filmed." "You knew about the camera," I reminded her. "I told you it was there for Colby's safety. You said it was a smart idea." The first clip began. Monday morning 3 weeks ago. Colby was playing with his sensory blocks, the soft ones that helped him stay calm. Francine walked over and snatched them away. "7-year-olds don't play with baby toys," her recorded voice said sharply. When Colby reached for them, she slapped his hands, not gently. The sharp crack made my mother gasp. "Francine," Hank said, his voice strangled. "Keep watching," I said. The next clip, Colby using his communication device to request lunch, the tablet saying in its robotic voice, "Hungry, please, sandwich." Francine taking the device and putting it on top of the refrigerator. "You can talk," she told him. "I know you can. You're choosing not to. You won't eat until you use your words." The footage showed Colby tapping his chest frantically, his sign for thirsty, then rubbing his stomach for hungry. Francine sitting at the kitchen table reading her magazine, ignoring him completely. 2 hours and 17 minutes passed before she finally gave him half a sandwich and a juice box. Dennis stood up, his face pale. "Mom, what the hell are you doing? He can't talk. He has severe autism." "Sit down," I said. "There's more." The worst clips came next. Colby having a sensory overload, flapping his hands, spinning in circles, making high-pitched sounds, all normal stimming behaviors that helped him regulate. Francine grabbing him by the shoulders, shaking him. "Stop acting like an animal. You're not an animal. You're a child. Act like one." Then came the restraint footage. The first time, she used dish towels to tie his hands to the chair arms. "You'll sit here until you learn to be still like a normal child." She left him there for 45 minutes while she watched her soap operas, occasionally muting the TV to ask, "Are you ready to behave?" The camera captured everything. Colby's terrified face, his attempts to communicate distress, the way he eventually went completely silent and still, dissociating from the trauma. "Jesus Christ, Mom," Dennis whispered, tears running down his face. "He's just a little boy. He's my son." But I wasn't done. The final footage was from Tuesday, yesterday. This time, she used actual rope from the garage. She tied his arms to the chair, then his ankles to the chair legs. "Your mother coddles you," she told him, her face close to his. "But I know better. You're going to learn discipline if it kills me. 7 hours. 1 for each year you've wasted pretending you can't be normal." The timestamp showed she left at 12:47 p.m. Mrs. Patterson called 911 at 3:23 p.m. Nearly 3 hours alone, tied to a chair, unable to move, unable to call for help, unable to even reach the water cup she'd left mockingly just out of reach on the table. When the footage ended, the silence was deafening. Everyone stared at Francine, who had gone from red to white to gray. "I was helping him," she said, but her voice had lost all authority. "Children need discipline. He needs to learn." "Learn what?" My father stood up, and I'd never seen him so angry. how to be traumatized, how to fear the people who should protect him. Carlton, Francine's brother, spoke for the first time. "Francine, this is what Dad used to do to us. Don't you remember? The rope, the chair, the hours of being told we weren't good enough. You swore you'd never do that to your kids." "But I didn't," she said desperately. "My children turned out fine." "Did we?" Dennis asked. "Mom, I've been in therapy for 5 years dealing with what you call discipline. And now you've done worse to my son, to a disabled child who can't even tell us what you've done to him." Hank was the first to leave that night, but not before saying something I'll never forget. He looked at Francine, his wife of 35 years, and said, "I don't know who you are anymore. Maybe I never did." He moved out that same week and filed for divorce within the month. Their marriage couldn't survive the revelation of who Francine really was beneath the pearls and cardigans. The criminal case moved faster than I expected. Officer Rivera had been thorough in his documentation, and the prosecutor, a woman named Patricia Chen who had a brother with autism, took the case personally. Francine was charged with child endangerment, false imprisonment, and abuse of a disabled person. Her lawyer, probably recognizing the mountain of video evidence against her, advised her to take a plea deal. Guilty on all charges, 5 years probation, 300 hours of community service, specifically in disability awareness programs, and a permanent ban on unsupervised contact with minors. The day of her sentencing, she stood in court and said she was sorry if anyone misunderstood her intentions. Not sorry for what she did, just sorry we didn't understand. The judge, thankfully, saw through it. "Ms. Francine," he said, looking over his glasses at her, "I've reviewed hours of footage showing systematic abuse of a vulnerable child who couldn't speak for himself. Your intentions don't matter. Your actions do. This plea deal is generous, and I suggest you use this opportunity to genuinely understand the harm you've caused." Dennis surprised everyone by moving back to Cincinnati permanently. He took a lower-paying job but said being near Colby mattered more than money. He started attending therapy with Dr. Morrison, who specialized in autism family dynamics, and slowly began building a real relationship with his son. Not trying to fix him or make him normal, but learning to enter Colby's world instead of forcing Colby into his. "I failed him once," Dennis told me during one of Colby's therapy sessions. "I won't fail him again." My family rallied in ways I never expected. Wade and his wife Kelly started taking Colby every Saturday so I could have a break. Simone used her connections in healthcare to get Colby into an innovative communication program at Cincinnati Children's. My parents sold their house in Columbus and moved closer, transforming their basement into a sensory room where Colby could safely stim and regulate. But the most remarkable change was in Colby himself. The trauma was real, and it took months of specialized therapy to address it. Dr. Patel, his trauma therapist, explained that even non-verbal children internalize abuse, sometimes more deeply because they can't verbally process it. We had to rebuild his sense of safety from the ground up. 6 months after that terrible Tuesday, Colby did something extraordinary. Using his new communication device, a more advanced tablet with predictive text, he typed out a full sentence during family dinner. "Grandma Paulette and Grandpa Jerome make me happy. Francine made me scared. I am safe now." We all cried. Even Wade, who prides himself on being stoic, had to leave the table to compose himself. I learned something vital through this nightmare. Trust your instincts. Every red flag I ignored, every uncomfortable feeling I pushed aside, was my intuition trying to protect my son. I'd let desperation override my judgment, and Colby paid the price. Now I know that no help is better than harmful help, and that family ties don't guarantee good intentions. I also learned about the power of truth. That camera footage, as horrible as it was to watch, gave Colby a voice when his own was stolen. It showed our family who Francine really was, stripping away decades of careful image management. It protected other children from her because the court records are public, and several parents from her former school have reached out to me with their own stories of her discipline. Today, 2 years later, Colby is thriving in a specialized school where difference is celebrated, not punished. He uses his communication device fluently, has friends who understand him, and most importantly, knows he's loved exactly as he is. He still doesn't speak with his voice, but he doesn't need to. He has 100 other ways to tell us what's in his heart. Francine lives alone in a small apartment now, estranged from almost everyone. She sends letters sometimes, still insisting she was trying to help, still believing that forcing normalcy on a child is love. I throw them away unopened. Some people never learn that love isn't about making someone fit your expectations. It's about meeting them where they are and helping them flourish as themselves. My son was tied to a chair by someone who claimed to love him, left alone and afraid, unable to cry for help. But he survived. We survived. And our story became a testimony to the truth that every child, regardless of ability, deserves dignity, respect, and genuine love. If you found value in hearing our story, please like this video and share it with others who might need to hear it. Your comments and experiences matter to this community we're building. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more real stories that shed light on what happens when we stand up for those who cannot stand up for themselves. Thank you for listening to our journey.